Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Annabelle, Talent Community Coordinator here at BioBuzz. I'm thrilled to be here today for another one of our exciting Career Catalyst sessions. We're so excited to have you guys all here today, so welcome. Today we're joined by Famita Kapadia, founder and president of Capamed Consulting, for an insightful discussion on fractional leadership and consulting, a game-changing strategy for businesses looking to scale and innovate. Famita is a highly accomplished expert in entrepreneurship, business strategy, and innovation, with over 20 years of experience guiding startups and inventors through the complexities of technology commercialization. Through her work at CapMed Consulting and Amplify MedTech, she has helped countless companies navigate product development, fundraising, and strategic partnerships, all while mentoring the next generation of entrepreneurs. She's also an active volunteer in the life sciences as the Women in Bio Capital Region Membership Vice Co-Chair. And in this session, we're going to explore how fractional consultants provide high-level leadership and specialized knowledge to help companies without the commitment of a full-time hire. So whether you're transitioning into fractional work or looking to leverage fractional leadership for your business, Famita is going to share some valuable insights to help you make informed decisions. But before we dive in today, I do want to give a big thank you to our sponsor here at BioTrack for sponsoring this session. BioTrack is a leading resource for upskilling in the life sciences, having trained over 17,000 scientists through cutting-edge biotech workshops. You can learn more about them at biotrack.com. I also want to mention that today's event is part of the BioBuzz Talent Lab, your go-to hub for career growth, job opportunities, and industry connections. So if you haven't already, be sure to get on and join our Talent Lab, join the beta testing of that to stay connected and access more resources like this. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to hand it over to our guest, Famita.
Everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. I like to keep my sessions fairly informal and interactive. So I would appreciate it if you guys can jump in with questions, etc., as and when you have them. And I'm happy to, take questions in the middle of the presentation. I prefer having questions rather than, me just talking to you. Also, I would request if everyone can please mute their microphones. I am getting some background noise from someone. So thank you all thank you, Annabelle, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this session. As Annabelle said, I am Famita Kapadia. I had a little introduction slide, which I'm going to go ahead and skip since Annabelle did a wonderful job introducing me. So let's jump into what is fractional leadership, right? So as we're talking about, if you are a startup building something, or even if you're a small to medium sized company, hiring full time is always it's a big risk that we are taking, right? Because we have to hire a person, we have to make a commitment for a full time position. We have to make sure that they have the specific talent and the needs, and more importantly, that they have the cultural expertise required to be able to fulfill the role. So you might hire someone who is a great technical fit, but maybe they may not be a cultural fit with your team. And now, within a few months, you're in the process of rehiring them because you don't have good team dynamics and you cannot make things work. Or you are in that situation where you really need to get something done, but you know that you are going to complete that within a year, and then you won't need that particular set of expertise after that year. In situations like this, it makes sense to start thinking about, is this a full-time hire position, or can I make this work with a fractional executive position? And Also, it's sometimes, as you're well aware, not sometimes, actually, always, as you're well aware. The top tier executives can be fairly expensive, right? You're looking at a price tag of a minimum of 250K plus benefits plus bonuses, and so the tab can start getting pretty heavy. And again, if you are an SME that needs a particular set of expertise but don't quite have the budget to put on that tab, that's another great area for you to think about. And hiring is always a slow process, right? Yeah, there is a lot of onboarding required. You have to find the perfect fit, as I mentioned, more importantly, culturally rather than technically. And after you hire the executive, it is quite possible that you might not be using them full time. Maybe you need them only part time, and hiring somebody full time may not be the right move for you. And so, in situations like this, a fractional executive is a great option because often fractional executives are highly experienced professionals who will bring their expertise, leadership to multiple companies at the same time on a part-time project or interim basis. So this is the part that you have to know, that a fractional executive is probably is working as a fractional executive for 2 or 3 or 4 companies at the same time, and they are providing expertise to multiple companies at the same time. But if you need somebody for only 25% of their time, it is a great fit for you because now you're getting their expertise, but you are not having to pay the high price tag that would be required with hiring a full-time executive. So when we talk about fractions, and fractions is becoming more and more popular, right? But we want to make sure that we understand what is the difference. What makes a fractional different from, say, a consultant or an interim? So with both interims and fractionals, the person is embedded with your team. They're going to work, they're going to roll up their sleeves and work alongside your team. Uh, with the interim, you usually have an end date. Let's say that your CFO left, you are in the process of hiring a new CFO. You know that it'll take you a year to hire a new CFO, and so you have an interim person fill in that role. So for an interim usually has an end date. A consultant definitely has an end date, but a fractional may or may not have an end date, right? Because they might start in one role, but if you think it's a good cultural fit and if you like the work that they are doing, they can then transition into other aspects of the business as your company keeps growing. Engagement is never full time for a fractional. If it gets to the point where you are using most of their time, it makes sense for you to then hire them into the team at that point of time. With a consultant, it may or may not be a full-time position. And with an interim, it's always a full-time because that person is filling that role in the interim while you are looking to hire somebody else. A fractional and an interim will represent your company as a leader. So when you hire a fractional CEO or a COO, they will represent themselves as, I am the fractional, I am the CFO of company X doing Y. A consultant will never represent themselves as a leader of the company because they are employed by a different organization, and they will represent themselves as a leader in their consulting firm. Fractionals and interims will lead a team. Consultants will never lead a team. So just to set the stage on how do you think about a fractional and how do you think about a fractional as a person that is different from a consultant and an interim. And then an advisor, which a lot of early stage and even late stage companies will have, technically is advising you. The advisor typically is advising the C-suite, and so they are not involved in any of these activities. They might perhaps be meeting with your C-suite on a regular basis, a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, and providing advice on growth, scale, product development, strategy, whatever their expertise might be. So just wanted to lay this out as a baseline for how to think about a fractional executive and how to decide when it is a good time for you to hire a fractional executive. So what kind of why should you think about hiring a fraction, right? As we discussed, you get access to high level expertise without the full time commitment. This often becomes a pretty big reason because cost effectiveness is a major consideration for a lot of companies, but you still want the talent, you still want the ability to be able to have the expertise, the experience that can guide your company in the right direction. Um, as I mentioned, your fractional in the previous slide, as I mentioned, your fractional may or may not be may not have a dead end date for their role. The reason for that being that as your company grows and scales, your fractional can transition into a different leadership role. So maybe you have somebody who starts on as let's say that it's a startup that's coming out of academia, and you need a fractional CEO in order to get the startup off the ground at that point of time. And the person works early stage, maybe helps spin out the companies, and maybe gets the first pre-seed round of funding into the company. And now the company is at that pivot point where maybe you need someone with a little bit more targeted experience. So you decide you want to now hire a CEO, and that CEO is going to be bringing in a different set of expertise. The fractional CEO that has been working with your company for the past year or 2 years, they may either decide to transition out at that point of time, or they may decide that this is a really good fit. The fractional and the team may decide this is a really good fit. And so I'm going to transition into the role of a COO instead of being the CEO and hand that over to the new person who's incoming. So you have that flexibility of transitioning your fractional from one role into the next, depending upon how your company is growing and how well the fractional works with the company. As we mentioned, there is this significantly reduces risk, right? Because cultural fit is a huge thing with any hiring. And so with a fractional, you may hire them. If it's not a good fit, you can, transition them out after a given point of time, and you can bring in somebody else. This really helps, especially if you're a company in early stages of development. This becomes very, very valuable for you. So most startups will tend to use a significant amount of fractional talent for this reason. It also significantly reduces your HR burden because you don't have to do onboarding, you don't have to worry about benefits, you don't have to worry about training, all of those things that HR has to do. It allows you to rapidly execute strategic initiatives. So when you bring in a fractional, you bring in a leader with a lot of experience, they can pretty much hit the ground running, and you can get to scale pretty quickly with that. And you're bringing in fresh ideas and perspectives, right? We all know I myself am a founder of two different companies, and I know that when I am in the day to day, in the weeds with the work in my life, sometimes I can get stuck in a place, mainly because I'm so much into the weeds of building the business that even though I am perfectly capable of thinking outside the box, when I'm stuck in the weeds, I may not be able to think about the alternatives that I would need to help my business grow and scale. And so bringing in a fractional that has an outside perspective can really help your business get fresh perspectives and make sure that you're staying agile, that you're pivoting when required, and you're not getting stuck in the weeds. The other advantage, as I mentioned, is fractionals work with multiple companies at the same time. And that is a huge advantage because when I am working with multiple companies, I learn from everyone that I'm working with. So I am working, let's say, with a company that is developing e-textile technology. And I am working with a company that is developing a nutraceutical technology. And I am working with a company that is developing an AI-based platform for digital health. All of these different companies, because I am interfacing with them, I can bring ideas from one company to the other. Lessons learned from my work with the digital health company can be applied to my work with the e-textiles company. So the fresh perspectives keep coming in on an ongoing basis because the fractional is getting that perspective from multiple companies in real time as they are working with you. So when should so who should I apologize, it says when. It typically what I meant to say is who should hire a fractional. That we talked about startups and early stage companies, small to medium sized businesses, companies that are undergoing transformation, or businesses that are facing challenges, or companies that need interim leadership. So let me give a few examples here. So I had a role, I was hired by a company that had been in business for 20 years, and they were doing well, and they were in a great place. They had revenue, and they were doing very well. But their revenue was flat year over year. They were not seeing growth year over year. And so I was brought in to help them think about, how do I scale my business? How do I get beyond the steady state that I've established with my business? And so I worked with that company for about 6 months, and we worked intensively on understanding how is the company currently being used, who are the customers, how are the customers currently using their products, what other things can the customers use that the company offers, but either the customers are not aware of it or are using those services from a different place. And then how do we acquire new customers, right? We have a steady state because we have customers that are using us on an ongoing basis, and they are very loyal. But how do we get new customers to get in to adopt our product? How do we create value for other customers? So that in those 6 months, the company significantly figured out how to pivot from its current steady state and grow into a whole different, grow their business by additional customer acquisition, by providing new products to existing customers, and then also sunsetting customers that were not really supporting the growth of the business. Um, if in When it comes to startup and early stage companies, and this is where where I am for the most part of my career, I work with a lot of startup and early stage companies. And so let me quickly go over this. So if you are a startup that is developing a product, and I'll talk about a medtech startup life cycle. You can start in the research and development phase. At this phase, you're really early. You may have an idea, you may have a lab prototype, you may have a patent, and maybe some proof of concept that this particular device works in this particular indication. This might be a good time for you to consider bringing on a fractional CEO who can then help you transition your idea or your proof of concept from an idea into a real company. There are a lot of steps involved in early stage transitioning of an idea into a company. And a fractional CEO at this stage is great to help you get to that point. You may, you will likely continue with that same fractional CEO in the early stages of company formation as well, where the fractional now is involved in developing a business plan, helping get to a commercial prototype, establishing a problem solution fit, and going out and getting some early funding for the company. From that point, now you know what your idea is. Now you know what your business is going to do. You start moving further into design and development, where you're establishing a product market fit. So now you're getting very defined on how you're going to address the particular need that you have identified and what particular market segment will you be working in. Now you're developing your alpha prototype, maybe doing first in human studies, developing your regulatory and reimbursement strategy, and getting some early partnerships going, right? Having conversations with customers, asking them, if I build it, will you buy it? And getting that buy-in even before your product is ready, so that you know if there is a need in the market for something like this. Again, at this stage, you'll have a fractional CEO. You may keep the same fractional CEO, or if your funding needs have significantly changed and maybe you've raised 2 million so far and your next round is going to be 5 to 10 million, and you need to bring in someone who has the contacts and the ability to raise those 5 to 10 million, you may transition out your existing fractional CEO and bring in a different fractional CEO or a full-time CEO. But at this point, you also want to start thinking about bringing in a fractional COO, somebody, because now there are so many moving parts happening in your company. You need somebody who is going to stay on top of things and keep things organized. And you definitely want to consider bringing in a fractional CFO at this point of time. Moving further in your company, where you have your product is developed and you are you're developing testing sites, you're conducting clinical studies, you're getting to that point of getting regulatory approvals, reimbursement, you're actually establishing your go-to-market strategy and establishing partnerships. At this point, your CEO has to be a full-time CEO. But now you might think about having a fractional chief sales officer, a fractional chief marketing officer, because you're in the early stages of sales and marketing. And you may have a fractional CFO, or if you have the funding, you might have transitioned the fractional CFO into a full-time CFO. Once you get into launch, at this point, it's all about customer acquisition and market entry. So you'll bring your fractional chief sales officer full-time into the company, but you might keep your fractional CMO, and you might bring in a chief strategy officer, because now there is a strategy that needs to be implemented, which is the go-to-market strategy, which is different from your front-end innovation and development strategy. And then lastly, when the company is at scale, in addition to growing your market leadership, you're also thinking about IPO and exit. And guess what? You're going to bring in a fractional CEO again at this time. The reason I say fractional CEO is the experience required to exit a company or take a company to IPO is different than the experience required to build a company. So you might bring in a fractional CEO that has specific expertise around exiting a company, who can help your company exit. So depending upon the stage of development, you can have different fractional roles that you can think about bringing into your company. So with that, the last thing I'll talk about is what is the value of a fractional CXO and what can they help you with? Again, you're hiring experienced executives, so they're definitely accelerating your time to market. They're helping you increase your revenue and profitability if you're in the sales cycle and you bring in a fractional CSO. They can enhance your strategic planning and execution. A lot of companies, especially startups, tend to go a little easy on the strategy part of it, especially in the earlier stages of development. And if you have not done the strategic planning and execution well, it will definitely slow your market entry, your launch, your customer acquisition. And so, having someone who can be strategic with your company and help you develop clear, actionable plans to execute on is very valuable. You can bridge leadership gaps without the long term commitment. You reduce the risk and you improve decision making, right? Because you're not adopting the risk of hiring a full time person, but you're definitely improving your decision making by leveraging seasoned individuals, their judgment and their insight. If you are an SME or a startup, you know that you're working with a small team, you're wearing multiple hats. The CEO, or even if there are two or three C suite people in the company, having a third or a fourth person in the company on a fractional basis really helps the C suite, because it not only brings in the fresh perspectives, but also helps take a few things off their plate. Juggling too many things at the same time is genuinely extremely exhausting. And if you can have someone who can help you take a few things off your plate, that not only eases the burden on the CEO, but it also helps you grow and scale faster. Um, Importantly, it really helps build investor confidence and board level expertise. And I say this because let's say that you're a startup which is formed with a first time founder. Maybe the founder has a lot of experience on the research side. Maybe they are the inventor, they have 20 years of research, but they don't have the experience to build a company. Or maybe it's a young founder. Maybe it is somebody in their 20s or 30s who is a first time founder and they are building a company. In both these scenarios, it's going to be really hard for these founders to raise money, because when investors invest, they're looking for the team. They're looking for, does this team have the capability required to build the company that needs to be built? And so bringing in a seasoned executive as a fractional can help you build investor confidence, help you recruit the right board members, and help you with fundraising, which will help grow your company. Obviously, you will have a lot of mentorship and guidance if you have a seasoned fractional on your team. And it improves efficiency and operations because this person has seen multiple different projects. They have seen where things can go wrong. They know how to employ best practices and optimize processes so that you're getting the highest bang for your buck. And so, depending upon what stage of your company is, you as the owner of the company have to be strategic in thinking about how you want to bring in a fractional to actually help you with the growth and scale of your company. With that, I will stop and I will take any questions that you have.